thanks for coming. And my name's Dave Ziegler. I'm Director of Regional Planning, and I'd like to welcome you here tonight. This is our fifth presentation in the guest speaker series that this agency's been putting on in this fiscal year. I'll give you a quick rundown on who we've had in that series. We had Elaine Clegg from Idaho Smart Growth and a member of the Boise City Council speak to us last fall. Also, Governor Paris Glendening, the former governor of Maryland and the leader of the Smart Growth Leadership Institute in Washington, D.C., was also here with us last fall. Earlier this spring, we had Reed Ewing from the University of Maryland and the author of the American Planning Association book, Best Development Practices. He was here with us in March talking about best development practices. Then I guess that was February. Then in March, we had two panelists, Ellen Greenberg from the Bay Area and Mark White, an attorney out of Kansas City, who are experts in the field of transit-oriented development, who came and spoke with us about TOD. And tonight is our fifth presentation in the series, and I'll get to that in a moment. We actually have a sixth presentation planned in August. We will be visited by a gentleman by the name of Robert Groh from Envision, Utah, which you may be familiar with as a large visioning and collaboration project in the, I guess that would be the Wasatch Front in Utah. And so we're looking forward to that. And tonight our speaker is Luther Propst from the Sonoran Institute in Tucson, Arizona. And I first became familiar with Luther and his work and the Institute through the efforts of the Sierra Business Council up in Truckee. Luther has had a relationship with the Sierra Business Council for a number of years and has done a number of things with them. I've heard Luther in the past speak about gateway communities, communities, say, at the entrances to national parks and things like that, about large ranch preservation, and about different economic development strategies for towns in the West. And here locally, Luther is still working, or has recently worked with the Sierra Business Council, and also has recently done some work with Douglas County. And tonight he's going to talk with us about hallmarks of success for Western communities. And so, Luther, I'll just turn it over to you and enjoy. Thank you, everybody.
I want to thank you all for being here. I do feel a bit like I should be speaking to this person, but I'll try to avoid doing so. I will wander around some and maybe use the hand mic as well. I want to thank you all for coming. It's great to be here. It really is nice to be here in Nevada. I don't know if people follow the political winds in Arizona, but the Arizona legislature, which has recently considered a bill, and it may become law, in which case I probably won't return to Arizona, but the Arizona legislature is considering a bill that will affect how land use planners and people like me, recovering planners and recovering land use lawyers, operate. They're considering a bill that will change the way that medical research is done at the University Medical Center there in Tucson, so that instead of using white rats, they'll use land use planners and land use lawyers for the medical research. And I went and testified against it. But they said that there's a couple things that work. One is that in Tucson, the land use planners and lawyers are more plentiful than white rats are. And two, there's clear research evidence that the researchers just don't seem to get as attached to the lawyers and planners as they do the white rats. And three, there's some things that white rats just won't do. That's pretty mean. But no, thank you all for coming. It's great to be here. I want to thank the Regional Planning Association, for our agency, for inviting me. Had a wonderful tour this morning with Rosanna and David. Thank you for showing me around. I'm going to speak about our work in Tucson and our work around the West. And I live in a town that is, it's in one of these big kind of square, not exactly square, but states with straight lines. I live in a town that is that's in a state that is rapidly growing. It's a city that's rapidly growing. It's also a state that has a city that is dominant within that state. You know, the kind of what we learned in planning school, the primate city, where 55 or 60% of the population lives in this city. And I live in another town that's widely considered to be more progressive than the dominant city. It's got a college. It's a college town. There's a major university there. It's a town that's widely considered to be a place where the local residents are much more interested in outdoor recreation. It prides itself on being progressive compared to the other city. People tend to be more involved in the outdoors, much more focused on this kind of intangible quality of place, I suppose, than you see. And it's a city that where I live where people kind of resent the big city that dominates everything, and the people in the big city have never even heard of the small town by and large, or the second city. So I don't know if any of that is relevant to your situation here in Reno. So let's see if there's any lessons to be learned from our work. And I'm going to talk about our work in Tucson, also our work in Colorado and in western Montana, and kind of blend some of our work in small towns with our work in Arizona generally, basically. I'm the executive director of the Sonoran Institute. I've been with the Sonoran Institute since 1991. I was one of the founders of the organization. We promote community decisions that respect the land and the people of the West. We work throughout Western North America, and our goal is integrating our concern for the land and our passion for the land with our passion for the people of the West as well, and our respect for people and their wisdom. All of our work is about communities doing a better job of preparing for the future. Our vision for the West is broad. It's holistic. It's a vision of healthy landscapes, of vibrant economies, and livable communities. We work to integrate those three goals. And, you know, in many ways I consider myself fortunate to be able to travel around the West as part of my job, because I just love the region. It's a unique place. It's a magnificent landscape. It's a landscape that stirs deep passion with the mountains and the canyons and the wide open ranch lands and open lands and the rivers, the wild rivers, the working agricultural landscapes, a big part of the West for most people. Obviously the wildlife habitat. If you're from southern Arizona, you have to show a slide of saguaro at some point in your presentation. So the distinctive vegetation, also the historic downtowns and the sense of place there is around the towns in the West, and the great recreational opportunities, the sunny days. It's really exciting to see what's happened to the Truckee River here in Reno. Last time I was here, this project was just in the design stage, and it's really exciting to see how bringing recreation and people and sense of place back into town. And also, one of the things about the West that I think most of us really find attractive is just that distinctive local character. Now, this sign, I should say, probably wouldn't pass the sign ordinance in a place like, let's say, Carmel, California. But if you talk to people here in Driggs, Victor, Idaho, they love this sign. It's an icon. I asked one of the local people, why is everybody so interested in that drive-in sign? He said, well, probably because most of us that were born here in town began our life's journey at the drive-in theater. Sorry. That's bad. So aside from the majesty of the land, aside from the landscape, the mountains and the deserts and the scenery and all, the West is unique in the global economy. And I'm going to talk about that because we occupy a unique niche. The vast expanses of wildlands adjoining the growing, prosperous cities, the opportunity to participate in a vibrant global economy while at the same time having access to wildlands is almost unique in the world. More than any other place, the West combines the vibrant, diverse economy, the access to capital, the opportunity for participating, for getting on an airplane quickly and being anywhere in the world, combining that with world-class opportunities for solitude, for hiking, for fishing, for hunting, for bird watching, for watching wildlife, is unique. And I'm going to talk about this some more, but it's our competitive advantage in an increasingly globalized economy. Also, just the opportunity to live in a town that is tied into the global economy, that's prosperous, that has cultural events, surrounded by scenic lands, is unique. It's something that the West offers that very few other places do. And as I said, it's really our competitive advantage. There's a couple of characteristics that define the West that I want to talk about. I want to quickly run through four that I think are the keys to understanding the future of the West. The first, of course, is aridity and drought, limited water supplies, probably not in most places in the West limited to the point that it constrains, but it is limited to the point of requiring us to make choices more than in other places. We have to choose how much of our water do we want to go into municipal uses and urban uses? How much do we want to use for farming and agriculture? Do we want to see the Colorado River Basin without agriculture in 50 years? How much do we want to save for in-stream uses, for ecological uses? We have to make choices more than other places. With global warming, we see much more uncertainty about the future of the water supplies in the West. But aridity and drought, here we are looking at the Lake Powell or the Glen Canyon Reservoir. You can see the bridge there. This was in 1999. This was in 2003. Some real challenges we face in terms of providing water for this booming region as it continues to grow. The second defining feature of the West is the mix of public and private lands. Something else that is unique in the world in many ways, where you have a prosperous free market economy with huge economic opportunities surrounded by significant expanses of public lands, lands that are owned by all of us, that are open to all of us. About half the West is public lands, about half the West is private lands. 4 agencies manage the vast majority of the public lands in the West. On top of that, in the other 7 states, there's significant amounts of state trust lands, something that Nevada doesn't have. That's an interesting story, but probably not for tonight. The other thing about the distribution of public and private lands and state trust lands is that the ownership of these lands and the management of these lands by various agencies is utterly without any rational basis. It makes no sense whatsoever as to why some lands are owned by one agency and some by another. I mean, there's a certain rule of thumb occasionally. Forest Service has higher elevation. But the mix of public and private lands is you have public lands up against growing cities, and you have private lands in the middle of wild areas. Certainly creates plenty of opportunities for improved land tenure, improved land distribution at some point in the future. The third major factor that characterizes the West, is just the growth. There's booms and there's busts, but you look at places, particularly, let's say, Tucson, where I live, it has grown at 2 to 3% per year, every year, since 1945. The growth, there's no evidence that the growth is going to change. In fact, as you look at demographics and the aging of the baby boomers, and you look at the changing economy and the opportunity for more people to live anywhere they want and to work anywhere they choose, all indications are that the growth is going to continue. And again, of course, you have booms and busts like you have now in Wyoming with an energy boom, but if you level those out, it's a region that's growing. In the 1990s, the United States as a whole grew by over 13%, the largest percentage increase since the baby boom, also the largest increase in population in this nation's history, and the 5 fastest growing states are all in the Intermountain West. What's intriguing about those states is they are all public land states. The 5 fastest growing states in the country all have a significant amount of public lands. None as much as Nevada, but all have more public lands than private, much more than private. Nevada grew at 60% in the 1990s. Arizona grew at 40-some%. Now in Arizona, they tell us that Arizona is the fastest growing state over the last 2 years or so. It doesn't really matter. Colorado grew at 30%, Idaho at right around 30%, Utah at 30%. These are rapidly growing states, and again, all indications are will continue to grow. And again, all with significant amounts of public lands. The University of Colorado, the center of the American West, which looks at demographic changes in the West, projects that the West will accommodate 40 million new residents by the year 2040, a 65% increase. And again, if you look at these projections, the question is, where do we put these people? How do we create cities and communities where these people live? Not, are they coming? Because you might ship them from one place to another, but they're coming into this landscape over the next so many years. You guys know the figures from Washoe County. It's now a population of about 370,000, I'm told. It's projected to go to just shy of 500,000 by the year 2025. Dramatic increases in growth.
which gives you an opportunity to create cities that meet the goals of the goals and the aspirations of people that live here. The other thing that characterizes this growth, which I find extraordinary, is that in every western state, with the exception of Nevada, the land is converted for development at a much higher rate than the growth rate would indicate. So we're growing rapidly, but we're spreading more rapidly. And I think the reason why Nevada is the exception to that rule is Las Vegas, which is growing at a fairly high density because of the constraints in raw land for inventory and the way the BLM and the other providers of raw land kind of ration it out has led Las Vegas to higher densities. But outside of Clark County, growth is occurring, is spreading faster than the raw numbers of growth itself. You can just see how growth is not concentrated anymore. You've certainly got old towns, but almost anywhere you look around the West, you see this kind of pattern of growth. What are the implications of that? Of both the rapid growth and the extraordinary growth in resort communities, communities that have a high quality of life, creating whole new challenges in housing affordability, creating a gentrified society that the West didn't have in years past. And one of my favorite examples of this is the tale of two Teton counties. There's Teton County, Wyoming, which is the home of Jackson Hole, significant amounts of public land in that county, and a county that is the wealthiest county per capita in the United States almost every year. Over half of the new homes built in Teton County, Wyoming are second homes, third homes, fourth homes. Many are occupied 2 to 3 weeks a year. If you make the median income in this county, you can afford about 20 to 25% of the housing stock. So you have that kind of a situation where the person who teaches school, who fights fires, the police officers cannot afford to live in the community. Jackson Hole, Wyoming generates about 850 new jobs per year, and yet only provides housing for about 700 new people per year. So you're pushing more and more people over the hill into Teton County, Idaho. A, people have to drive over a dangerous mountain pass to get to work. B, all of the tax base, all of the Albertsons, all of the grocery stores and hardware stores and Walmarts are in Jackson Hole, and all of the residents that work and that have kids that are school age are in Teton County, Idaho. And in Teton County, Idaho, it's growing at about 8% per year. Population growth is occurring about twice as fast as revenue growth. Every new subdivision lot costs that county about a $5,000 a year deficit in spending. The state legislature, in its wisdom, has put a cap on the amount of revenue that can be generated from the property tax at 3%. So even if you're growing at 8%, you're going deeper and deeper into the hole. And there's a technical term for what happens when a county is facing this kind of growth and has those kind of constraints on its ability to raise taxes, and that term is bankruptcy. It's not viable, it's not sustainable, and it's that kind of gentrification of the rural West that we hadn't seen in the past. And stories like that characterize much of the West. The fourth thing I want to just mention, I'll be very brief, is the energy boom in the West, an unprecedented energy boom in portions of Wyoming, Montana. Here's gas wells in 1980 and 2003. We see the energy boom on top of the other features in the West that are causing unprecedented changes in communities, social changes, as well as changes ecologically to water quality and so forth. Profound implications for most of Wyoming, for parts of Wyoming, eastern Montana, Colorado. Together, the forces that I've described here are creating profound challenges. Challenges that are to date anyway, generally I think over the last 5 to 10 years, I would say the challenges are outrunning our efforts to respond effectively. Change is occurring very rapidly, and I don't feel like many communities are keeping up. For the most part, we haven't developed an effective, kind of comprehensive strategy for addressing these trends and their impacts on the fiscal well-being of communities, social impacts, ecological impacts, and others. So what do we do about that? I am always inspired by Wallace Stegner when he says, "Nothing would gratify me more than to see the West in all its sub-regions and subcultures both prosperous and environmentally healthy, with a civilization to match its scenery." I think an inspirational goal. the Sonoran Institute, we envision a West, to paraphrase Stegner, where the society matches the scenery. A couple ideas about how to get there, and then I want to talk about some very specific things. For better or for worse, the West, uniquely in the United States, and the United States perhaps uniquely in the world, is built upon big, audacious goals, big plans, a can-do attitude, big goals for adapting the landscape to our aspirations and our goals. Whether that's the massive federal water development projects that allowed for agriculture in the West, that allowed for our cities to grow and prosper, whether that's the interstate highway system in the West, whether that's the audacious city to the south here in Nevada that has just molded the landscape and the waterscape to its needs, or whether that's the energy booms. We have to accommodate, we have to accept, we have to acknowledge that there's that kind of a big, bold, optimistic view of the world that defines, I think, much of the West. We will create a society in the West to match the scenery, not by trying to stop the proclivity for thinking big and acting big, but by adapting that to our vision for a sustainable future. We'll lose if we present an essentially negative vision for the future of the West. We'll create a society to match the scenery only when we articulate an optimistic, inclusive vision for the future of the West that recognizes our passion for the land, that brings people together to realize that vision, and that's also based upon a respect for the people of the West. I'm convinced that one of our major goals is for our small towns, our growing cities, our counties, our watersheds, to do more to articulate a bold vision for a more sustainable, a more environmentally benign society, one that reduces our dependence upon the automobile, perhaps even leads the world in a conversion to the next energy source, the same way that the Western United States was the birthplace of the computer and the transition to a silicon-based economy. I think we have the ingredients here in the West, the optimistic perspective, the ingenuity, the natural resources to lead our society to the next energy source, post-oil. But we have to articulate a vision for communities where people want to live, where the quality of place is extraordinary. We have to articulate a vision for protecting and restoring our rivers and our watercourses. We have to articulate a vision for towns that are diverse and affordable, that are economically diverse, that are livable, that are surrounded by agricultural lands and wildlands, values that we hear all the time, all over the West, that promote excellent urban design, that make it so that new communities and new towns have the same kind of sense of place as older towns, that just generally promote more sustainability, a more benign footprint on Earth, that create opportunities not just for the visitors, but for everybody to enjoy our nature, that protects the wide open spaces that are the heart of the West for many people. There's a variety of signs of hope for how we get there. I increasingly am impressed by the signs of hope I see emanating from the local level, from counties, from states around the West. In the last 3 years, several states in the West have started down the path of making the kind of dramatic change that's going to be necessary for us to enhance and protect what we value as we continue to grow. You see it in things like the almost unbelievable agreement among the 7 states of the Colorado River Basin with the new compact, the new 7-state compact that the states agreed to in February. It still hasn't been ratified, but it changes the management of the Colorado River in a dramatic way, and that was done by the states, recognizing their challenges and leading the effort to get there. You see it in places like Wyoming, a very conservative state in which the legislature over the past 2 years has created a wildlife trust fund and has put $45 million in it so that they will continually have funds to improve and restore wildlife habitat in Wyoming. We see it in Colorado, where the voters have approved an ambitious set of new standards for clean energy and alternative energy sources. We see it in the big cities of the West, where Denver, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, and others have made dramatic investments in public transportation and rail and are moving their cities' urban form to accommodate transit-oriented development. You see it with the really bold project of Envision Utah, and I'm glad that folks from Envision Utah are coming to speak, because we all have a lot to learn from that, where we basically ask the public, do you want to grow out or do you want to grow up? and you have an informed conversation about that. You see it in Montana, which we think is on the verge of passing a statewide Quality Growth Act that will provide not requirements but incentives for counties to do a much more thorough job of planning. You see it around the West. The first time in my career here in 15 years where I feel like there's a dramatic series of changes occurring in our ability to accommodate growth and change, protect our values, create more livable communities. So what do we need to do to bring these disparate signs of hope so that we have a real realistic basis for optimism about the future of our communities? I'm intrigued by 3 suggestions. The first is, I'm convinced that those of us that care about the West, that want to create a society to match the scenery, need to spend more time and more energy on articulating a broad, compelling, attractive vision for the future that appeals to the hopes and aspirations of the public. And there's a special opportunity for environmental advocates and conservation advocates to recognize the importance of this. We need to change our tune from "I have a nightmare" to "I have a dream." And it was articulated by Donella Meadows, who comes at this from the left, if you're familiar with her writing. And I just think her quote is pretty interesting. The trouble is, the sustainable world generally offered by environmentalists is based on restriction, prohibition, regulation, and sacrifice. Hardly anyone seems to envision a sustainable world that would be a nice place to live in. Now, that may be a bit unfair, but it drives home an important point, that we are only going to create a society to match our scenery when it is a compelling vision that people find attractive and not a series of constraints and regulations and so forth. And I talked about that earlier, about the importance of a vision. The second point that I want to make is that it's just critical for us to build our policies around the realization that protecting the majesty of the West and creating dynamic, beautiful, well-planned communities are together our best and our most enduring tools for promoting economic prosperity, particularly as the economy continues to globalize. Of course, we will have situations like Wyoming now where the energy boom is causing prosperity, but for the long term, the enduring fundamentals of prosperity comes from recognizing that our competitive advantage is our landscape to a large extent. We've looked into this extensively in this product called Prosperity in the 21st Century. We analyzed the economic performance of all 414 counties in the West and compared that against public land management. We would like to get at urban planning, but we looked at public land management. You cannot conclude that the presence of public lands and the conservation of those lands correlates with poor economic performance. Does it correlate with positive economic performance? Well, it depends. On the one, you wish you had a one-handed speaker. On the one hand, it just depends because it depends upon your access to markets. We found that having an airport within an hour to 2 hours that had 25,000 enplanements, which would mean maybe 3 or 4 flights a day, is critical to being able to tap into that global market and to being able to create a diverse, vibrant economy. The educational attainment level of the local population is also essential, along with other factors. So a couple thoughts on the economics. It's now well accepted that the economy of the West, I think everyone here understands that the economy of the West has made the transition from natural resource extraction to what I call a knowledge-based economy. Of course, agriculture, of course, logging are still important, but if you look at the total economic performance, even of the non-metropolitan West, they're very small, 2 to 4%, and even tourism isn't a major factor. It's the variety of things that relate to the knowledge economy. Again, with the energy development, that's an exception in some places. Tourism certainly plays an important role. It's a major factor, but we see increasingly in community after community that tourism is playing second fiddle to what we call the knowledge economy. The knowledge economy is producer goods and services, people that can live anywhere, architects, engineers, financial managers, people that can live anywhere and choose to live somewhere because the fishing's good, or because they like to go hiking, or they like a small town. People who have income from other sources, who have income from investments, essentially. Let's look at Moab. I know Moab is much smaller than than Reno and Washoe County and Sparks, but there's some important lessons here. Until about the late 70s, mid 80s, Moab had a steady economy that depended primarily upon the uranium industry. The uranium industry went south at that point. They looked around, and as one of the now former county commissioners said, we went fishing for a little tourism and we caught a great white shark. The irony is that much of that great white shark came from Ed Abbey, who wrote Desert Solitaire, who was kind of the strongest voice in the West opposing industrial-scale tourism, but he put Moab on the map because of his evocative writings about Arches National Park and the surrounding landscape. But they went into tourism, and of course it's a place where tourism makes sense. You've got Canyonlands National Park, Arches National Park, and over about 5 to 7 years, tourism boomed in that community. And with it came a whole host of problems. At the foundation of the problems was that the uranium industry paid taxes and paid taxes well. The tourism industry doesn't. As one of the county commissioners said, we got an economy where kids come to town and they're wearing a pair of cut-off jeans and they've got a $20 bill in their pocket and they stay a week, and when they leave, neither one has been changed. So you've got off-road vehicle use, you've got mountain biking, you've got general camping, you've got a whole series of problems, including huge law enforcement problems, ecological problems from the poorly managed recreational use. You've got 70 to 80% of the law enforcement calls, whether that's law enforcement or search and rescue, are from tourists, from visitors. You've got a situation that's so intensive during the spring and the fall that the county had to build a new wing on the hospital, a trauma wing, designed specifically to deal with the unique medical needs of middle-aged men wearing spandex. It's a terrible image, isn't it? And you think I'm kidding, but the trauma wing sits empty during the winter and the summer, and it's there for the 7 months a year that you've got the needs, the demands from the men I described. And so what is the response in Moab? Tourism is and is desired and will be part of the economy, but they are working hard to change their niche in the world from one that is overly dependent upon tourism to one that sells their setting, their public lands, their scenic beauty, not as a place for fun hogs to come from all over the country and go mountain biking in the spring, but as a place for people who want to bring jobs with them, people who have jobs that can live and work anywhere, and their marketing strategy now puts very little attention on tourism and much more on attracting the person who came to Moab to ride a bicycle or to go rafting on the Colorado and who stays because they want to live there. And there's a big difference in how you position yourselves, and we see many communities taking this kind of tact. The main point I'm trying to make is that our comparative advantage in the global economy is the high quality of life, the sense of place that attracts bright, creative people, their ideas, their energy, and their capital. Over the long term, I think for Nevada and I think for the rest of the West, this is the key, at least this part of the state. Chambers of commerce increasingly understand this. Even Utah, Cedar City, Utah, advertising from tourism into, yes, we're a beautiful place, and you can connect here, and you should bring your jobs here for that reason. The challenge is, how do we protect that golden goose, or that goose that lays the golden eggs? How do we bring our marketing and our growth management efforts in line with one another so that we have policies that are built upon that premise that we will only remain prosperous so long as we protect what people value. The third point I want to make is I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk more specifically about growth. But the third point, and it's got 4 parts to it if you're taking notes, is that we have to improve how we anticipate and how we plan for growth. And there's a variety of ways of looking at this, but for my money, there's 4 steps that we need to put more attention to. And I'm leaving off a lot of very important things about tax base, about transportation, but I want to walk through these 4 because I think that in order to protect what we value economically, we've got to do a better job of going through these 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first is, start with the regional conservation and open space framework. One of the things that I'm most proud of at the Sonoran Institute over the last 50 years is the role that we've played, along with others, in Pima County. Pima County is the size of New Jersey. And I'm not saying that metaphorically. It's literally almost exactly the same size as New Jersey. It's a county that's growing rapidly. It's a county that has had a dramatic series of endangered species challenges, and the county decided to no longer be reactive, not only around endangered species, but around all forms of conservation. So they came up with, after intensive public participation, 2 years, hundreds of meetings, dozens of committees and scientific advisory councils and economic advisory councils, came up with a plan for the long-term protection of the heritage in Pima County, not only wildlife, but also protecting the working agricultural landscapes, also protecting the archaeological resources and other resources. And they came up with a plan that identified the lands that have the highest conservation values, and at the same time then removed barriers and obstacles to the lands that have lower conservation values and higher development values. And in Pima County, it has changed the tone of the debate dramatically. In many ways, it's weakened the power of neighborhood associations, because you've got a situation now where people just can't oppose everything, and the answer is that the development will go further and further out. And so it's leading to better planning, more options for housing within the fabric of the community, and at the same time identifying land for long-term inventory needs of the community. But it's causing that development to occur in a more compact, more livable manner that's much more efficient for the county in terms of its tax base. The second piece that I would add is develop a clear understanding of the implications of various alternative growth patterns. I think it's critical. I think the lessons that we can learn from Envision Utah are critical. They've done a great job of asking the community, okay, we're going to have this many new people, where do we put them? And how many of them drive to work, and how many of them take the bus, and how many of them work close to their home, and those kind of questions. We've been involved in similar efforts up in the greater Yellowstone. This is the greater Yellowstone region. We're looking at 8 counties there, and we're looking at the distribution of rural homes. And then we project those out into the future. Here we have rural homesteads in the year 1999. We project over the next 15 years population growth of 65%. Under the current trends, we would see the amount of land developed in rural areas would go up 350%. Again, that's spreading. Every new house takes up much more land than every old house. Huge fiscal implications for these counties. So we projected out under the current scenarios, and we've done a lot of research into how we get these numbers. We look at what would happen if the current development patterns continue for another 15 years. And then we see under the current patterns that 15% of the agricultural land in these 8 counties would be lost. 8% of the natural areas would be lost. Then we look at kind of a growth on steroid. We look at some of the higher estimates for growth given continued kind of boom times. And you can envision a scenario with a loss of 36% of the agricultural land and 24% of the natural areas. And then you look at the same amount of growth occurring under what we'll call smart growth patterns. And we'll describe those more, but with incentives to cluster near towns, with towns investing more in water and sewer so that people can live on smaller lots, so kids can ride their bicycles to school, with zoning in the rural areas to urge development towards the city, with conservation easements, the same number of homes built, but a loss of only 1% of the agricultural land in these counties and 3% in the natural areas. So you can accommodate the same number of people with dramatically different scenarios of the fiscal impacts as well as the impacts on continued agricultural operations in natural areas. The third piece of this is the important priority of promoting quality infill, promoting quality urban design through public awareness, through education, and through policy reform. I hate to give you a bunch of words, but it's kind of dense, and then I'll get out of the dense part. Infill is key. We're convinced it's a major factor. Communities need a multifaceted approach that focuses on infill, but also recognizes that given the growth projections, there's no way we're going to accommodate the growth that's anticipated exclusively through infill. But first, we need to create and recreate livable cities. And I'm delighted, last time I was here in Reno compared to now with the downtown, the huge progress you've made. But even Lubbock, Texas, is there anybody from Lubbock? Even Lubbock, Texas, the Chamber of Commerce polled their members, said, what are we doing right and wrong? And the members said, you know what, no matter how fast you respond to people that ask you for data, we've got problems here. Take a look at the McDonald's sign and take a look here at the Texaco sign. The Chamber members in Lubbock said, Lubbock is ugly, and that's our biggest problem. And so they worked without an ordinance, but through peer pressure, through a sense of civic pride. This is the same street now. You can see the McDonald's sign. You can see the Texaco sign. And after they went through the process that was led by the Chamber, a new sign ordinance came through without a single objection because people realized that you can make as much money, you can make more money on a more attractive street. And now, again, Lubbock, without a lot of restrictions and regulations, has the kind of design guidelines that cause people to realize that there is something attractive in this community. Related to that, we've developed a new project. We're convinced that we have to promote higher quality urban development, but we're convinced it requires much more marketing than just imposing a set of regulations. We do a project in the Northern Rockies, in Montana and Wyoming, building from the best of the Northern Rockies, identify best development practices. And this is done with a committee, an advisory council of a broad cross-section of the community. What do people in the community value about new development? What do they want it to look like? Identify completed, specific development projects that exemplify one or more of those principles. And then celebrate them. In Tucson, we give an annual awards. It's a major event. We have 800 people come out to an annual awards program celebrating the best development projects, awarding those, celebrating them through publications and media outreach, allowing people to understand what does the public mean when it says we'd like to see higher quality development. You can't describe it intangibly. You have to name a project and say, why can't this be more like blank? And that's when you start seeing a change in the development community as well, and then developing recommendations to encourage higher quality development. In Tucson, in many communities in Montana, it's much easier, it's much faster to build junk than it is to build something that's enduring and that people are proud of, because you almost always have to go through a longer, drawn-out process to build something that really resonates with people, and there's ways to change that. We also do it through education. In Tucson, we run the Community Design Academy, where we invite people to come and learn about the nature of design and how to make design better. We recruit diverse participants, builders, architects, neighborhood advocates, environmental advocates. We meet every Monday night for 4 months. In the end, they get a diploma. They're in the community, not protecting their narrow self-interest, not promoting a not-in-my-backyard agenda, not promoting anything goes anywhere, but promoting high-quality design. And it has changed the tone of the debate about growth in the greater Tucson area. So it's not just not near me, but instead it's how do we make this work well. It's developed a base of knowledge outside of the architectural field that is helping change the way growth occurs there and how people view the community. Final point is the importance of promoting smarter growth on the edge. Despite what we do with infill, I've talked about the population growth projections over the next 20, 30 years. You look at the research coming out of the Urban Land Institute and others, under almost any scenario, no more than about a third of the new housing needs, the new development, will be met by infill. No matter how much you do to revitalize downtowns, about two-thirds is going to be on the urban fringe. And frankly, I think it's a huge lost opportunity in community after community because we pay attention. We pay very close attention to what's happening downtown, and we pay almost no attention to large-scale new development happening right on the edge. And that's where we have an opportunity to create more livable cities, is by paying more attention to that. There's a variety of studies that have been done on how we create smarter growth on the edge. We've got one I'm happy to send you, published by the Sonoran Institute and the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, that outlines principles that we've developed for growing smarter on the edge. But the important point is you've got to design these principles tailored to your local circumstances. We did one project on 7,500 acres on the southeast of Tucson, and for this particular project, there was one landowner for the 7,500 acres, the state of Arizona, it's state trust land. The development will benefit the schools. They came up with five principles to guide smart growth on this particular piece of land. I'm going to be very quick. Open space. Start with this green infrastructure, a hierarchy of open space from natural areas through to urban parks. Use that as the skeleton of your community. Again, I'm not saying this is right for Reno. I'm saying this is what we came up with on a piece of property outside of Tucson. Give people choices for mobility. Don't require everybody to get in a car if they want to drive from their house 30 feet away to the grocery store, but give options for bicycling, for walking. That's a theme that permeates what we're doing in this new area. Create town centers or mixed-use developments, or even better, integrated-use developments that create a sense of place. Create desirable places where people won't be stopping just long enough to get their work done and moving along. The fourth is create diverse housing options. Create a diversity of densities, create a diversity of prices, create a diversity in sizes, and I'm being facetious about the tents. But that's an important feature in community after community, and the polling I've seen indicates it's very important. And that's how you deal with the question of density, is we all have different needs and different aspirations at different points in our lives. And then create design guidelines tailored to that local circumstance. Let me close with a quote that I really like. Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood. It's a little gender specific for me, but it was from the 1890s, so we'll give them a break. And probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans. Aim high in hope and work. I'm convinced in the West, given the prosperity that the West is seeing, given the growth that we anticipate, given the fact that we live in a community that's very vibrant and open to new ideas, that we can aim high in this area, and we can create communities that capitalize on our comparative advantage in the global economy, and we can, in fact, create a society to match our scenery. So thank you for having me. I very much appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to some questions. Isn't it amazing what kids can do with computers? Yes. The structure? We're a nonprofit corporation. We're tax exempt under Section 501c3 of the code, so we're a publicly supported charity. Sure. Yes.
I'm Greg Angelo, local professional planner. Isn't the language of development, I call it artificial adversarial language, how the public sector, the private sector, the neighborhoods come into confrontation? Don't we have to change that language of how we look at development or redevelopment? Because it seems like it's like professional wrestling. We just set up these conflicts and controversies, and we focus on the battle rather than the outcome.
I think that's quite articulate. I agree with you entirely. Much of our work is breaking through what is often seen as just almost a perfunctory kind of argument. And we're convinced that it happens best when people get involved and get to know each other and develop their priorities and their goals and their aspirations before they're responding to one specific idea that they don't like. And that's why, for example, one of the things that we've recommended to a number of places is this kind of community, the Community Design Academy idea, where you get a critical mass of people in the community, and they develop a shared vocabulary. And a lot of it is vocabulary, but a lot of it is the fact that, and in defense of people that tend to say no to everything, there's been so much bad development built. It's easy for people to reach that conclusion. And it's so important to have examples where you can say that the net density may be higher, but look at this project. Let's go out and look at it, and you'll agree that it's a wonderful place to live or to work. And you need those examples on the ground, and it can change the dynamic. But I agree, there's a lot of it that is just, there's a lot of conflict that doesn't have to be. Anything else? Yes.
A lot of the growth in Las Vegas is because of the island's land sales and the slip one. I'm familiar with that.
Right, sure.
Southern Nevada, do you have an opinion on that process?
Well, I don't. We're in Reno, so anything I say about Las Vegas, I can criticize, right? Is that the?
It's not just restricted to Las Vegas.
Right.
Other communities you think
Right.
about. So I'm asking a generic question.
Right.
What's happening in Las Vegas?
Is a general
The idea is that
as a general matter, the Bureau of Land Management was not created and is probably not the optimal organization for being the ultimate decider of the pace at which land enters the market in Las Vegas. It's really not their job. In Arizona, we got out of that game generally back in the late 70s when there was a whole series of land exchanges that got the BLM out of the suburbs and got the state land department into those lands. And the state land department creates its own set of challenges, which we could talk about at some great length. But in a city that's growing, it's very difficult to, I've never seen a situation on this continent where people limit growth by simply not having available land to hang on to or to develop on. So I don't know how well the BLM reads the market and so forth, but we have a lot of places in the West where as cities continue to grow out, we're either going to see development leapfrogging over public lands, or we're going to see some changes in in the ownership of those lands. In a lot of cities where we're working, there's a dramatic need to rethink the ownership of those lands, create kind of defensible public land areas, create other areas where there's BLM land that may need to be disposed of. Outside of Las Vegas, everywhere we've looked at, there's a preference locally for exchanges instead of selling for cash, particularly if that cash goes back to the Treasury. So we see in other places much more discussion about exchanges and a growing recognition among most everybody that there's some BLM lands on the fringes of most Western cities that simply don't have public values, that as they get surrounded by development are appropriate for them. So I think we've got to back up and look more at the continued expansion of these cities and how do we best provide land for them. I hope that's helpful. Anything else? Yes, one last question, and then I think that some people are here to get some business done, right?
I'm just curious as to how communities around the West, where there are several communities within the county, compete, I think, for taxable dollars. How do you see that playing out for other communities if that situation exists?
I think from my limited understanding of this neighborhood is that you guys have done more to acknowledge and address that kind of race to the bottom than other places. I think probably the most fundamental challenge or the most fundamental problem that good planning faces in almost every county in the West is the race for tax base. And there's a few communities in the country, very few, not many in this part of the world, that have gone toward revenue sharing. And for good long-term planning, that's probably the single most important step that communities can take. It's difficult because somebody's ox gets gored, but this ability, this venue shopping that tax-generating companies can do creates terrible planning. And it's a huge challenge everywhere you go. In fact, you can just about discern the city limits of most Western towns by, I'm not going to name any names, but by where the big box is, usually just outside the city limits, and it's not a healthy situation under any scenario, and it really is, I think, at the core of much of the poor planning that we see all over the West, and very few places have figured it out. Like I said, you guys are at the front end of that train. I want to thank you all. Very enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll have a short break, and the business meeting will start at 6:45. Thank you.